Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, welcome to this week's podcast episode. We're going to be talking about the stepmom-specific anxiety no one talks about, why you feel it, and how to manage it. And here's what I want to ask you. Do you ever feel like you're on the edge just waiting for something to go wrong, even when everything feels fine? That's what I call stepmom anxiety. And today we're going to get real about it. We're going to have a conversation about it. Because I hear this a lot from stepmoms, how they're like, everything's fine, but I feel like I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop. And so there's like this bubbling anxiousness of like, when is that shoe going to drop? Because there's always something that's going to come up or something that's going on or something that's coming around the corner in stepmom life, right? And so here's what I want to like set the tone and go through. Being a stepmom comes with a special kind of stress and it doesn't get talked about enough. So we're going to break it down. Like, what is it? Why does it happen? And what we can do about it. And this episode is for you if you ever feel like you're carrying around a backpack full of bricks and you're just weighed down and you're like, oh my gosh. So come join us. Come join me as we talk about the special thing of stepmom anxiety. So it's the invisible load, right? So we often feel the pressure as stepmoms to people please everyone, your partner, your stepkids, even the ex, and it leads to that constant stress and constant anxiety. And being a stepmom is exceptionally hard if you are a people pleaser or if you are a recovering people pleaser, because you're trying to keep everyone happy. You're trying to make your family work and, the co-parenting situation will work and somehow not lose yourself in the process or along the way. And if you are a recovering people pleaser, it's easy for you to like chameleon in and just, like, oh, I want the ex to like me, so I'm going to do this, that, and the other. I want my stepkids to like me, so I'm just going to do this, that, and the other. I want my partner to really like me and know that I'm a really great stepmom. And so I'm going to do all of these things, right? And then the next thing you know, you're like, what in the hell happened? I'm like a shadow of myself or a shell of my former self. And here's how stepmom anxiety is different than regular anxiety. You feel like you're out of place. There's the rejection of your stepkids. There's navigating that awkwardness with the ex, things that like people don't normally have when they are navigating anxiety. Like normally people aren't concerned about what it's going to be like being around their partner's ex, or they're not fearing like rejection of their partner's kids, or they're not feeling like a third wheel or like they don't even belong, right? Like usually when you partner up with somebody, you're like, oh, we're just going to build this life together. And there's not all of this baggage of like before. It sometimes feels like you're juggling knives while walking on a tightrope, but the caveat is the crowd is made up of your partner's kids and the ex and maybe all of society or extended family. And it feels like you're under a microscope and it feels like you're on stage essentially. And maybe you're like naked on stage and everyone's watching you, almost like they're rooting for you to mess up or make a mistake. So, like, absolutely no pressure. So, let's talk a little bit more about like the triggers behind stepmom anxiety. So, the fear of rejection and how not feeling accepted by your stepkids or the ex can create those deep insecurities. And this goes back to like childhood stuff. If you felt abandoned as a kid, or if you felt, like you didn't belong as a kid, or if you never felt good enough, if you felt like you didn't ever measure up, not feeling accepted by your stepkids or the ex, especially if you're a people pleaser, is like, it just shines light back on that. Like, I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to measure up. And all of these insecurities that you thought that you had dealt with, like bubble up. And the crazy thing is that I hear from stepmoms, same here too, like in my situation, is that they come up out of nowhere. Like you're like, okay, I already put those to bed. Like we're good, but you're not, right? Because it's hard not to feel like you're constantly auditioning for a role that you didn't even sign up for, right? Like you didn't necessarily like sign up to be a stepmom, like you signed up to fall in love with your partner. And then there's all of these things that come along with it. And you're just like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? And so that fear of rejection is something that's very common, especially if you feel like I have to show up and love my stepkids like they're my own and like do all of the things. Give yourself a little bit of grace there. And then going back to like feeling like an outsider, a lot of stepmoms feel like they don't truly belong in their home, especially when your stepkids don't live there full time, right? So you've got your stepkids part of the time, and then the other part of the time you don't. And what I hear often is like, my relationship with my partner is amazing. It's wonderful when my stepkids aren't here. But when my stepkids are here, there's, constant communication with the other house. There's the phone calls to the other house. There's the emails, the texts, oh, we forgot this at mom, so we need to go back and get that. Or there's the chaos of having the kids. And especially if you show up like as a stepmom that doesn't have kids of your own, going from single to stepmom, I do have a podcast episode on this. I believe it's podcast episode number 50. Let me look really quick. It is, yeah, number 50. So aliciacrasco.com/50. I'll link that in the show notes though too. It's a lot to go from just being like a nice, quiet, clean house to having kids over that are chaotic and it's messy and it's noisy and all of the things. It doesn't, so you don't ever feel completely settled or like you can breathe. Like maybe you can't take your bra off when your stepkids are there. Or maybe it feels like you can't unbutton your pants and just like actually let out that breath. Like you just feel like you're constantly holding that breath. Almost like you're trying to join a club where everyone knows the secret handshake. Everyone is, except for you, that is, right? And so it's just this weird conundrum of like, where do I fit in? How do I fit in? What's my role? Oh, all of the things. And then if there's perfectionism, like if you've got tendencies of perfectionism and you have high expectations, that adds into it, right? Because there's those internal and sometimes external pressures to be the perfect stepmom. And the perfect stepmom, perfect air quotes here, is very different for so many people. Like what I think a perfect stepmom might be is very different than what you might think it is very different than from like your partner, my partner, the kids, the ex, whoever thinks that it is, right? And you're expected to balance your partner's happiness, the kids' feelings, and somehow your own sanity. Good luck with that. But again, it goes back to feeling like an outsider. Like give yourself a little bit of grace. More chances than not, this is the first time you've ever done this. And if you've got the perfectionism tendencies, it's really hard to make mistakes. Like you get really down on yourself. It's really hard to own those mistakes that you make. It's really hard to feel shame. It's also really hard when you've got high expectations and sometimes you can't reach them, but you, by God, you are willing to die trying. But then also if you're trying to, put those high expectations on anyone else to try to make them, it's just a complete recipe for disaster. But here's how stepmom anxiety shows up, the hypervigilance. And if you know what I'm talking about, send me a message on Instagram. I'm just at Alicia Crasco on Instagram and say, oh my gosh, the hypervigilance is insane. I totally know exactly what you're talking about. Again, like I said at the beginning of this, it's waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? You're always on alert for potential problems, feeling like you're waiting for the next meltdown or the next issue or the next message or the next email or the next random drop off or whatever it is. And you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I get to be like this? You feel like you're paranoid. You feel like, uh, am I a crazy person? Like you start to feel like a crazy person, right? Because you're also overthinking interactions. Like, oh my gosh, was I too strict? Did I overstep? Do they hate me now? What do they think of me? And it's so hard to not overthink everything because, also, like I said at the beginning, it feels like you're on stage. It feels like you're under a microscope. It feels like everyone is rooting for you to fail so they can like expose that you're like a fraud or an imposter, like that imposter syndrome is there, especially if you don't have kids of your own. And so it's like I'm expected to show up and be a mom, but like I'm not really a mom. So if I do something I'm not supposed to do, like, oh my gosh, all of these people all of a sudden know that like I'm not a real mom. And it's so you just get in your head about all of the things because there's your expectations of yourself. There's your partner's expectations of yourself, your stepkids' expectations of yourself, the ex's expectations of yourself, extended family's expectations of you, society's expectations of you. And so it's like, oh my gosh, who who did I piss off today? And how am I fitting in, or how am I not fitting in right now? And now I've just overanalyzed everything, and you've overthought everything. Like, if overthinking could be my middle name, it would totally be my middle name, like especially early on in my early years as a stepmom. And so many stepmoms I coach say the same thing. Like, I find myself like in this cycle of like overthinking everything. And I'm like, girlfriend, I get it. You 100% are going to do that until you can build like your confidence. But right now you feel like you're walking on eggshells, right? Like you're constantly tiptoeing around the kids, or you're constantly tiptoeing around the ex to avoid any of the drama. And it's almost like playing dodgeball with your emotions every single day. And it is exhausting because your emotions come out of nowhere and they get hit by some random thing that some random ball that like your stepkids threw, or your partner threw, or like the ex threw, or whatever it is. And then you're just like, why am I in the bathroom crying on the floor? Why am I hiding out in the closet posting something on the stepmom side community? Like, what is happening? How did I get here? And how is this happening? But again, it's just feeling like you're an outsider. And it's the anxiety of like, what am I doing wrong? Where do I fit in? I don't know. I actually don't know where I fit in. So I am constantly like in this weird limbo. So I'm not going to leave you hanging though. I'm going to give you a few coping strategies to manage your stepmom anxiety, and stepmom anxiety specifically because it's not just regular anxiety. So one, lower your expectations. But seriously, like lower your expectations and accept that not everything will be perfect, and that is okay. A lot of the women that I coach are ambitious, career driven, type A, very black and white personality. Did I mention ambitious? Did I mention high achieving? And so it's really hard to understand that not everything is going to be perfect, and they're not going to get everything right. And you're not going to win everyone over on the first try or the first time. So it's really hard to let that perfect image go, or that image of whatever perfection looks like for you. And if there are mistakes, that is okay. And newsflash, you're not going to win a Stepmom of the Year award. And that's fine because it's not about perfection. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? But it's okay to make mistakes. I expect that you're going to make mistakes. That's totally normal. That is how you learn. But also, you have to let go. Number two, you have to let go of what you can't control, which is so freaking much. There's so much that is not in your control, but focus on what is in your control, like how you react, and not so much of what the kids do or don't do, or what the ex does or doesn't do. You can't control how your stepkids or their mom feel about you, but you can control how you let it affect you. And here's the weird thing, again, with the stepmom anxiety, if you have a colleague or a friend of a friend or an extended family member or some stranger on the street that doesn't like you, there's a good chance that it really doesn't affect you. But if all of a sudden one of your stepkids comes out and says, Alicia, I don't like you, or Jennifer, I don't like you, or Rachel, I don't like you, or whoever, I don't like you, it affects you. If it's your stepkid or like one of your extended, like one of your immediate family members, maybe like your in-laws, or maybe if the ex comes out and says that she doesn't like you for whatever reason, like that really gets into our head, and it's really hard to shake that. But it's okay. You can't control what people think about you. Also, other people's opinions of you are absolutely none of your business. If you're multitasking, please come back to me. Other people's opinions of you are absolutely none of your business. If they like you, great. If they don't like you, that's okay. They might not like you for some crazy ass petty reason. It's okay. Everyone's entitled to their feelings. If they don't like you, it's going to be okay. Number three, please communicate with your partner. Be open about your anxiety and your stress, and also let them know how they can support you. Again, support looks different, very different for everyone else. Don't keep it all inside, thinking that you have to handle all of this on your own. Your partner also needs to know what's going on in your head. And again, like telling them is great, but telling them every single thing is going to drive them mad and is going to cause that many more issues in your relationship. So if you were to say, if you were to go to your partner and say, hey, you know what, I'm having a lot of anxiety about this, and here's what I need for support going forward, or here's what support looks like for me. I personally used to struggle with having to hear about like past vacations or past things that, they did as a family. And so I would say to my husband, when I wasn't completely irrational and like losing my mind, I'd go back and say, hey, I really struggle when you or the kids bring up like, oh yeah, I remember when, we went and did this. And I wasn't a part of that. So I know it was like pre me. Here's what I need when that's going on. I need help with you redirecting the conversation, because if I redirect the conversation, I look like a crazy, jealous, insecure, whatever, insert evil stepmom, right? But I don't want to focus on the past. I want to go in and build memories together. So here's what I need from you. When that happens, can you help me redirect the conversation? Can you hold my hand? Can you pull me closer? Can you give me a kiss or put your arm around me, or, whatever it is? Like physical touch is my love language. And so I'm like, this is what support looks like to me. So for you, it might feel ridiculous. It might feel dumb. It might feel stupid. It might feel like, why do I have to tell you what I need for support? Like, you should just know. Well, your partner doesn't read minds, and as close as you guys may be, and as much as you guys may be able to read each other's minds, support looks different for everyone, especially like in a touchy thing. So please just go in and say, hey, here's where I'm struggling. This is what you can do to help me. Help me redirect the conversation. And then this is how you can help me, like hold my hand, squeeze my hand, put your arm around me, kiss me, whatever it is, or like spend time with me doing blah blah blah, depending on what it is. Number 4, practice self-care without guilt. This is a really hard one, because some moms feel like I need to be there, I need to be part of everything in order to fit in, I need to be there for everything so I don't miss out, I need to be there for everything so I can show that I love these kids, I need to be there for everything so I can, so I can, so I can. And while I commend that, and while I think that's great that you think that, here's the flaw in that. When you do all of the things for everyone else and you're not doing anything for yourself, that's a perfect recipe for disaster. That's a perfect recipe for you to be burnt the F out. That's a perfect recipe for you to be irritable, to be a complete jerk, to fly off the handle, to be overwhelmed, to be frustrated, to break down crying. So whether it's a glass of wine or a yoga class that you want to take, don't feel bad for putting yourself first once in a while or more than that. Because when you go and spend that time doing something that brings you joy, whether it's something on your own, whether it's scheduling a date night for you and your partner, or meeting friends for lunch, dinner, coffee, whatever it is, you will come back feeling that much more refreshed, recharged, because you're doing something that you want to do. Number 5, please, 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 please find a support system. Go connect with others that understand this unique stress. Like find a stepmom or find a couple stepmom friends that get it. If you need support, if you need that community, come join us inside the Stepmom Side community. Like we would love to have you, but surround yourself with people that get it. And if you want me to like refresh like what I've just said, like here are some coping strategies to help you with your stepmom anxiety. Number 1, lower your expectations. Seriously, lower your expectations. Number 2, let go of things that you can't control. Number 3, please communicate with your partner. Please, please, please. Number 4, practice self-care without guilt, though. Practice your self-care without guilt. And number 5, find a stepmom support system. So, a few real life stepmom anxiety stories. Coaching, like the biggest thing I see coming up is like my stepkids don't like me, or I don't have kids of my own and I don't know what's too much or what's not enough. Or, oh, I don't know what to do when the ex shows up. I don't know what to do when the ex shows up and she keeps talking about how when her and my partner were together, this is what my partner did, or this is how my partner acted, or she makes it into a competition. I don't know what to do. Like I feel uncomfortable. There's all of these anxieties of things that come up. And if any of those relate to you, please send me a message on Instagram. Like, let me know, like, oh my gosh, I have anxiety about those things too. But I'll just tell you this. Everyone feels anxiety as a stepmom. At some point in time, everyone feels anxiety, and sometimes it's just always there, like simmering under the surface. And it's the hardest thing to deal with because it feels like ridiculous. It feels insane. Like you think, "Ugh, I feel dumb because I'm probably the only person that is feeling anxiety about this." But I'll tell you what, you're not. You're absolutely not the only person that feels this way. And just remember, stepmom anxiety is real, but it does not define you. You are doing better than you think, and this role doesn't come with a manual. So be kind to yourself. Like I said, there's probably a good chance that you've never done this before. So give yourself a little bit of grace to figure out how to navigate this and give yourself a little bit of grace to like watch, learn, observe like how your Insta family works and how it navigates different things and where you can kind of like fill in the gaps. And if you're in the stepmom side community, come in, share your stories, jump into the community so we can all support each other. And if you're not in there, you can send me a message on Instagram. So probably a good chance that I will get back to you a little bit faster if you're inside the community. But also, you're just not alone. More than anything, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And if your anxiety is talking too loudly, please turn the volume up on this podcast instead. I know that's not necessarily possible to like turn the volume down on your anxiety, but turn up the volume on this podcast instead. And I will talk to you next week. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.